All right, we're back. Next episode of Cap Table, one I've been really looking forward to and trying to make happen for a long time. I always talk about the importance of a great team, and I am truly blessed to have a set of exceptional individuals that I work with and that support me in everything I do. And I've got two great members of that team on Cap Table today. I've got our family office solicitor, my personal lawyer, Udo, and we've got my IFA and wealth manager, Charlie Luckhu. Welcome, guys. Good to have you.
Good to
Thanks
see you,
for having
Dean.
us, Dean.
Good to see you.
So look, this has been a long combined relationship. Sometimes we're working together, sometimes we're working one-on-one. And one of the things I'm most grateful to both of you about is it's not just the professional relationship where we spend time. You both support a lot of the causes and initiatives that I'm involved in and FFG's involved in. And Charlie, you were with us at Radar earlier this year.
Back in April.
Brilliant 300
event.
people. You came off of your holiday actually to do that for us.
When Dean asks, you come.
No, I'm really appreciate that. And I know it's not something that you do regularly or the folks at SJP do that kind of event regularly, but what was it about that made you willing to come and support us?
I think two things. The delegates were brilliant. The way that you positioned, this is the people that want to get in the room. We're going to be oversubscribed, but we're going to focus on these types of people, which we think, you could really help and influence. And for me, I've been a massive fan of financial education, right? And having the opportunity to talk to 120 people who were just listening and captive and being able to, I went into the event thinking, if I can just help one person take one thing out of it, it's going to be a massive success. After the night, I think I was inundated with about 20 questions and 10 different meetings, and my LinkedIn is still popping, and I've helped 8 people from that event. Brilliant. Not just delegates but also some of your mentors, and and the journey is just starting, and I know that in probably 2 years time someone's going to knock on the door and say, hey, you don't know who I am, but we saw you at Radar. And just to be on stage or in a lineup with Tim, with yourself, was just an amazing event.
I'm so grateful that you did it. And what I don't think the room understood, and we shared some of it on social media afterwards, is to get access to a wealth manager at St. James's Place, you normally have to qualify with a level of income, right? That's, they're one of the best wealth management firms certainly in the country, probably Europe, and right up there across the world. So even to get into that conversation is quite hard for people with a good income. And the fact that you were there the whole night off of your holiday, answering hundreds of questions was such a big deal. And I'm so grateful. And you did it with so much energy as well. I told you you were going to get absolutely bombarded, and you did.
But there were great questions, and the actual follow-up I was really, really amazed with, and some of the smart individuals, entrepreneurial people turning, they had every right to ask for SJP's advice. We set up pensions, we've done protection, we've done mortgages, I'm doing investments, I'm helping a lot of these individuals, and they may be, they may be young, they're in their 20s, but they're entrepreneurial people doing really well. They're trying to follow your network, they're listening to Timo, they're receptive, and that's the dream client, people who really want to take financial planning seriously and commit to working with me over the long term. So it's been great.
Oh, it's been brilliant. Well, thank you for doing it. And we supported my good friend Ben Lindsay from Power to Fight with his fundraiser at House of Lords, and I asked you tentatively if you could come, but you jumped right on it. Why did you want to be part of that and support that?
Yeah, you did ask me, and it was something that I was never going to hesitate to support you with. As a Black Londoner like yourself, these sort of initiatives where they're looking at knife crime that young people suffer in London, predominantly Black people, is something that it affects all of us, and we can relate to it. So it was something that I was always going to support you with. I wasn't too pleased. Dean actually was in charge of the auction that they had that night, and one of my clients, high-profile clients, had donated a sports shirt, And I started the bidding at a very, very high rate because Dean told me to do that. Luckily enough, I got outbid, so I didn't end up paying for a shirt that I've already got. But it was it was a fantastic event, and it was really the location was great as well. And I think that it was a sort of a positive event on the whole.
No, but that is a testament to the authenticity, I think, of the support, because you're right. Like, it is your client shirt. It's a friend of mine, and it was a signed shirt that we were auctioning, and you started the bidding, and I was laughing to myself, thinking, out of this entire room, you have infinite access to as many of these shirts.
Of course. I was praying that someone was going to outbid me, and they did in the end. So it was good. It was good.
Typical lawyer watching the coins. But like I said, I'm really, grateful for the support of both of you and the way we've worked together, like over my journey, especially in the last few years as things have happened. But Udo, probably helpful for people watching. When we talk about a lawyer, most people understand what a lawyer or solicitor is. But when we talk about kind of a family office lawyer, which is a phrase that maybe everybody isn't familiar with, that's a bit different. So do you want to just explain what that really means?
Yeah, so as a solicitor, what my job is essentially I'm a problem solver. And so if you sort of interpret that in the position that Dean has explained, being a family office lawyer, I'm essentially looking after Dean, his family, and also the whole organisation around it with FFG. Now, what it means is that in essence, I'm a bit of a project manager in a sense that I'm making sure all the different moving parts, whether that be the investment side of things that Dean's got going on, whether there might be a contentious matter, Dean might be in a dispute with somebody, whether there might be personal things going on with your family, really intimate issues that we need to look at, whether it's some estate planning documents that you need me to look at. Dean may have an issue with staff working in his house, or there might be an event Dean might be putting on where there might be some non-disclosure agreements, which are documents that you make sure that everybody that attends the event doesn't disclose what's gone on. So there's so many different moving parts. Dean and I will be working closely with that. You'll be telling me what you want. I'll be doing my very best to make sure that it's carried out in the way that you want it to be done. And to try, importantly, is to use my experience to try and see off any potential problems that may come down the line, which you might say, okay, Udo, I didn't think of that. Good point. Let's get that in. Yeah. So it's being a bit of a real project manager, because FFG is growing and growing and growing. You're going to need people to assist you on that side of things.
And it's one of those things where you have to kind of, and it took me a while to see the value and step into it, because as you say, it's preemptive, right? Where one of the best things and highest value elements of our relationship is the problems that don't arise and the things that don't kind of interrupt my life. Because all I want to do is spend my time working on Fortero and working on the projects that I'm working on. I don't want to be dealing with those disputes. And that's where you're in the middle of everything, making sure we're taking the right steps so that those things don't.
Yeah, I mean, a phrase you often hear is a lawyerly caution. So as a lawyer, you are naturally pessimistic because you can see problems down the line, and sometimes you can be seen to be putting the water on the fire of a really, exciting idea. But all you're trying to do is to make sure that if there are problems that occur, you've dealt with that from the offset.
Right.
So it's me and you having a conversation about things. You'll come to me with a really good, bright idea about what you've got going on. I'll say, that's great, Dean, we can do that. Have you thought about this? Right. You might say, yeah, Udo, that's fine. Or you might say, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah. So it's having that conversation to make sure things go as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, and there's another two elements to it, right? So, there's situations and times where you handle conversations or entire projects on my behalf. We did a great investment in Severance, something I'm really, really excited about. And once me and Dumi kind of had our conversation about if we were going to work together, how we were going to work together, it was something that you were able to pick up on my behalf and just run the discussion, have the negotiation and close out the paperwork. And I think the next time I got back involved was when I was signing it, right? You ran that whole, I don't even think I signed it. I think maybe you might have signed it.
I might have signed it because you've given me your authority to sign documents on your behalf, which is great. And that really means a lot to me. This is the other part of our relationship, in that you have essentially given me your trust. Yeah. So that's something that means a lot to me, and I have to make sure that it's carried out to the nth degree. the example that you've given with Severn was an interesting one, because in our discussions, I think one of the things that we were slightly worried about was maybe some reputational management issues that could crop up.
Right.
And that was something that you hadn't initially thought of, but you thought was a good idea at the time. We got that done. We got that in the contract. Right. And then, as you say, the next time that you came to deliver, you were signing a contract and deal with a great product.
It was brilliant, yeah, and we're pleased, of course, to be part of it. But then the other side of how this really works is, like, you are at the heart of everything. You know, there's kind of Anne-Marie who's at the heart of everything, and then after Anne-Marie, it's probably you. Like, you're the person who, if I disappeared tomorrow and people wanted to know what had been happening and who's most likely to have disappeared me, I think you'd be the person they'd have to come to.
Yeah, that's fine. And I mean, in my job, I mean, what you tend to do is that you have to be able to deal with a lot of information and get to what the important issues are. Because people throw a lot of stuff at you. You have to be able to grasp the really important issues, deal with it quickly, be able to say to you, Dean, this is what the issues are, this is what we've got to do to solve it, because you haven't got much time, as you know. So I know that whenever I'm texting or speaking to you, I have to be very, very sharp with things to get things done in an efficient way. And I'm sure, Charlie, you have the same sort of...
Absolutely, to the point.
Same, you've got to be to the point and you've got to be efficient. So yeah, I'm used to that.
That's also always good to keep like continuity in these things too, because now over the time we will work together. Like, you guys know what I'm involved in, where I'm trying to get to, what kind of things I don't like, and it helps the conversation to be more pointed. And I mean, when I was thinking about this prior to this conversation, when we first met, my financial situation was quite different to what it is now. It's been great the last few years, but it's quite different. And you were like willing and motivated and excited to build a relationship, even at a point it probably wasn't obvious to you, like how it was going to be fruitful for you.
I think I always go on it thinking it's going to be a 20-year relationship. Right. It's not about trying to max out what you can get over the next quarter, any interaction.
When we first talked, Charlie, we were talking about protection at that time, right? It was just, I came to you looking for protection, to probably maybe talk a bit about protection and exactly. How our conversation went.
And it's a great starting point, because, you know, let's look at what is, you know, important to you is your loved ones, and, you know, what would happen to you if you weren't here. So we had to sort of put life and cover in place and look at critical illness and look at your other assets and are they insured properly. And that's, you know, you start off with protection first before you move into investments. And once we created that really strong foundation, which is ever evolving as your net wealth is changing and other investments, we're continually reviewing that to make sure it's fit for purpose. And then we're building the investment plan on a very strong structure.
Right. Because like, people underestimate the importance of life insurance. And we were talking earlier that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who have worked hard to be an owner of £1 million house or a £2 million house, and their strategy is that house, that asset, will pass on to their children. But it's not quite as simple as that, is it?
No, there's inheritance tax, and inheritance tax is 40% of anything that you have over £1 million, assuming that you've got a traditional couple who with two allowances. So now, particularly in the south of England, most people's homes are exceeding that £1 million. So if you're asset rich in property but liquid asset poor and you don't have investments or cash, what you're doing is lovely to pass on that property, but if you haven't got a vehicle to pay the inheritance tax, it sits within your estate. Probate has to be paid, for inheritance tax has to be paid first before it can go to the beneficiary of that, right. That you wanted it to go.
Right. So you own £1 million house, you pass away, you want to give that to your children. They technically have to pay the £400,000 tax bill in order to take ownership of the property.
Yeah, everybody has up to 500,000. So a typical a partnership will have £1 million because it rolls over from on second death. So you're into spouse, there's no inheritance tax.
Right.
So if it's just £1 million property and you use your allowances, you'll be fine. If it's over £1 million, it's 40%.
Right.
So if it's 2 million, it will be 400,000.
Right.
And that 400,000 would have to be paid before the person would get the keys. If their vision was, I'll sell the property to pay the inheritance tax. It doesn't work like that, because you don't own the property to sell it until you pay the inheritance tax.
And if you pass it on into spouse, I understand, but if you pass it on directly to your children, is there an allowance there, or
There's just one allowance for your estate.
Got it.
And that estate is, if we're going to go really technical, it's 325,000 per individual, and then you have something called a residency nil rate band, which is set at 175, and that's specifically if you leave a property to direct descendants of yours.
Right.
So if you want to leave your property to a cousin or a family friend, that nil rate residency band of 175,000 would not apply. Right? It has to be left to children. But most people will sit there and they think it's, inheritance tax is someone else's problem, but I want my family home, but I'd love them to go to it. Yeah. If it's sitting over £1 million, you've got to think about how you're going to make sure that property goes to the person that you wanted to go to.
And that, coming back, was kind of where our conversation began, right? I was saying we've done well, we've built up a portfolio of assets, and now we have to think about how those assets pass through generations and pass through our families. And life insurance was one of the first things for me to put in place to help pay some of those inheritance tax bills. And then we started talking about, investments, and you've been super helpful in helping me build a portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And, tax optimization is what I'm always going to approach it with. You work hard, you pay a lot of taxes. Are you using all your allowances? And, we spoke today about pensions allowance for your children. We've spoken about JICEs and ISAs, and, anything that you can do to, I know how passionate you are about your family and wanting to support them, just building that nest egg for them in whichever shape, vehicle is right.
And one of the big things we're working on now is trusts, right? So to put money in a trust vehicle so that we can control the distribution of that money, in the event of death. So maybe talk a bit about the trust vehicle.
Yeah, so a trust is a way where you can maintain an element of control but move the asset out of your estate over a period of time. So there's a number of different trusts. Traditionally, you would talk about a bare trust or an absolute trust, where if I want so-and-so to have the rights to this or this gift, you can put it into that trust and that beneficiary will be named. Now, sometimes people don't know exactly who and when and what they want to do. So you have something called a discretionary trust. And everybody has an allowance of 325,000 every 7 years per person that they can put into a discretionary trust, which means that a sum of money is moving out of their estate, but they're still maintaining control, a degree of control over who gets it and how it's used, but you no longer have access to that 325.
Yeah, and I think it's, as we were discussing, it's one of the best ways to pass on capital, wealth, money to your children, but you have to start thinking long term, and that again is the value of the team, because we speak regularly. We had a call recently where we just kind of put everything onto the table, and it lets all of the experts contribute, give an opinion, so that we end up with the right the kind of right outcome. And sometimes we all have different points of view, right? But I guess working with somebody like me who's quite strong-minded, you too have to be strong-minded. But we get on fine.
Yeah, we get on fine. And I mean, the thing, this is an interesting conversation, because this is talking about the difference between being wealthy and being rich. Wealth is something that is more long-lasting. Chris Rock does an amazing skit on this on one of his stand-ups. I can't remember what it is, but if everyone has time to watch it, it's a really humorous way of looking how he defines the two differences. But with yourself, Dean, what I'm finding in as we're developing our relationship and doing more and more, your vision is becoming longer. So it means that you're looking further down the line, which means that it's a more of a slower way of dealing with your wealth, which is more likely to increase it, which is how all the great traditional families in England's history have done it over time.
Yeah.
You know, all the lords and ladies, you've seen it generation after
You can't put
generation.
me in that category.
You will. There'll be you'll be Lord Forbes, and in 100 years there'll be your great grandchildren will be living in big lands and everything.
But I always wonder, like, you've got a great portfolio of clients, mostly high-profile sports people, right? That's kind of your niche, which we'll come back to. How is my setup and the way we work different to, say, how you work with footballers or entertainers?
I suppose the way to look at it is because you're coming from an entrepreneurial background, you're probably more amenable to looking at ideas of things like trusts, real sophisticated estate planning. So it's easier to have that conversation with you because you understand the benefit of long-term growth. Yeah. Typically, sports people, by the nature, they're younger. Most professional sports people will be young because it's an athletic exercise, so they're likely to be younger. So not all of them, some of them, but not all of them will have that sort of patience long term. They'll be looking to get involved in things that are a lot more of the now, a lot more exciting, a lot more fashionable, which is understandable. And so that's where the main difference would be.
It's true, because I talked to some of my ex-footballer friends and some people who are currently playing football about some of the investments I've done. And actually, it's a really good parallel, because we were talking about an investment I've done which has a 12% per year, pretty guaranteed return. And when we spoke about it, you were like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I'd love to be part of that. That's a great investment vehicle. I talked to the footballers about it, and you do the maths on 12% over 3 years, and they're looking at it saying, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would anybody, want to do that? But it is, for me, like 12% per year is a great outlook.
It's just a different mindset. And I guess some of that just comes naturally anyway with maturity and having a family and all of those sort of things. But in saying that, I mean, lots of sports people, because they're financially independent, start families young. So you would think that they would have this sort of set of thinking about things, but they don't. Moreover, they'll be looking to get involved in things that are quite depreciate over time quite quickly, like cars and all those sort of things, which is fine. But it's just a different mindset, thinking more long term in terms of wealth. And allied to the fact that you're from a business background anyway, so you'll understand things, EBITDA and all of these sort of economic phrases that will be there. You'll have a really good grasp of that.
It is a little bit more natural for me. But it's also something that we talk about, because the next thing we did after protection was ISAs, just to max out on the stocks and shares ISAs. And I remember when we were talking about that, you were kind of like, listen, compound interest, right? Just play this forward at a reasonable rate of interest, and this is what it looks like over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're privy to some fantastic investment opportunities, but very niche and focused. So I'm never trying to outdo what you're doing with work, because that's through a very specific optics. What I'm trying to offer you is diversity, passive income streams, tax efficiency, which, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to worry about it, it's there. And when you need to get access to it, you can have access to it. If there will be minimum tax, consequences for you to access that money, and just doing some of the, the basics, really, really, really well.
Because that's how we came at our discussion after the foundation of protection. And it's kind of funny, because at that point in time, we were saying, okay, I want to retire, want to be able to retire soon, want to have the option to retire soon. I love my work so much. I don't know if I'll ever stop, right? But we're saying, if we were to retire at that point, I'd like to have this much income. And then you constructed a plan. To talk a little bit about how you thought about constructing a plan that would deliver that passive income.
I mean, you were very focused about, right, this is what I'd like to have, this is my lighthouse. With normal clients, you come out there and they haven't even thought about it, when do you want to be debt free, how long do you want to work for in the traditional sense, what sort of passive income stream. And a lot of the time I have to spend is almost helping them and unlocking those objectives. You've straight away, you've always known what success looks like, you've always had that North Star. All I've had to do is try to show you different ways of achieving that outside of maybe the normal ways that you thought were possible, and not try and replace those, but just complement what you've got in place. and put some models in there. I mean, some of the, I love sitting down with you and we can work through and we say, okay, what does 2% look like here? What does, a market crash look like here? What happens if the property doesn't go at this? And we can simulate until the cows come home. But one of the things that we've then got to do is when you stop working, we've got to managing sequencing risk. And that is, it's quite easy when you're putting money into investment and you're buying in there and you're getting dollar-based averaging. And if the markets, if the markets dip, we're leaning into it and making those investments. And over time, we're going to create wealth. When you stop and you maintain it and you start withdrawing it, you get the opposite, which is something called sequencing risk, which is the opposite of compound. And that's what we've got to make sure that we sort of minimize any disruption to your your portfolio and make sure it's well balanced and make sure that the money is where you want it when you want it, but at the same time, if you do have a year where you want to take more, it's it's available.
But that's my big focus at the moment, and at some point I'm going to print all of the reports that you've generated for us, because what I noticed today in our meeting today is there's a new number in the report for what passive income I want to have when I retire, and I think it's like 4 times the number that was in the original.
But your career is 8 times where it was when we started. So things that's the whole point. The plan is never rigid. It's got to be flexible, and your objectives will change, legislation will change, markets will change,
tax will change.
Exactly, and I haven't got all the the answers to all the future questions. What we've got to have is a solution to say, right, when these new events come, how are we going to respond? And having a responsive plan, which is right, this is, working with Udo, working with Martin, the tripod, between your team, how quickly can we adjust to the new normal?
That's so important. And that, again, comes back to the value of the team, because I'm lucky where I've got experts around me, like you guys are experts in your field. You've been doing this for years. So it always has to be a balance of, this is what I'd like, these are my intentions, and then you have to take the expert advice. Like one of the things Joel Koppelman told me when I was at Primavera, as the CEO of Primavera when I was working there, is he said, never pay for expert advice and then just ignore it. Like when you get expert advice, you probably should listen to it. And if you don't want to take the actions that you've been advised, like really think that through, right? And make sure that if you don't, that you're really certain about why you've chosen not to. And I'd like to think that's how we work together, that when you guys tell me something, you say, look, do not do this, it's risky, or do this because it's the best for you.
Yeah.
I trust you, and I try to, I think I listen. Do I listen?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting working with someone like yourself is that, you may agree with me, you may not, but you are quite demanding sometimes. And in some ways, I find that it's easier to work with somebody like that because they've got a clear idea of what they want. But the other thing with it is that I think that sometimes it can make me a better lawyer, because I know that if I'm going to give you a call about an issue that we've got going on, especially if you've got one of those days where the stress levels are quite high, you might be going, Udo, look, what's this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What's the outcome? So you're going to be very short and sharp with your questions. So I need to be in a position where I'm prepared to give you clear answers on that, because otherwise it will just add to your annoyance as that the issue isn't being solved. So that's why I say in some ways it can make you a better lawyer, because it means, okay, I'm going to be calling Dean in 15 minutes. I need to sort of preempt what he's going to be thinking. I need to sort of get into his mind and try and understand what does he want to know at this time. So that's where it's interesting working with someone in your position with all the sort of things you've got going on.
And it's funny because there's a lot of things that got going. I was just thinking about the range of those things, right? And to give the people watching like some perspective. So Severin Investment, Udo's the front guy negotiating that deal commercially and the contract. Some of the private equity investments that I've done and the paperwork around that, and where there's things to negotiate, and those are big money that we're putting at play there. But you also helped my mum when she had a dispute with the gas board, right? So she had a dispute with EDF, and well, not you, but your team were working on that as well. So it's everything across. When we say family lawyer, it really do mean.
Yeah, that's it. So, it's just having a bit of sort of emotional intelligence as well as all the other bits that we've got going on. And, for example, help with your mum. I exactly knew where she was coming from, and we had a conversation about that because, you know, that's just how it is, and it's something that you have to be able to understand, show good patience, understand where your mum's coming from. More importantly, understand why you're asking me to deal with that, because obviously you're time poor. It's not something that you need to look at just yet. Can you try and find a solution for me, Udo, with this?
Yeah.
So that's what you're constantly trying to do.
That's definitely what I was trying to do. But I was also trying to avoid the wrath of my mum with EDF. I was just trying to dodge that bullet because I knew exactly what that looked like. Charlie, one of the things you said to me at the beginning was, what we're going to do is we're going to invest in your future self, right? That was a phrase that you came up with that really, really stuck with me. And you were really focused on saying, we've got this situation today, you've got this lifestyle today, you've got this cash today. How do we invest that into the future you, and what return do you want that to deliver for the future you? Like, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, and you were at the extreme case of it, but for a lot of people out there, most people, you work hard and you have an income, all right, and then you have what we call essential expenditure, right, which is your rent or your mortgages or your mobile phone, groceries, utility bills, etc. And then everything, once you've paid those essential expenditures, everything else is discretionary. And the conversation I always have with people is, if you want to say, I want to have X amount by age 60 to live off, you're going to build that through creating a liquid asset base. And it's the discretionary expenditure that you have two options with. Do you pay yourself today and party and and buy your cars and your watches, or do you sit there and say, no, I want to pay future me, right? And it's paying future you which will build up your liquid asset base, which will give you that that income stream in retirement. And I'm never here to tell people how to spend their hard-earned money. All I'm here to do is show them, saying, well, if you could live without that, or you can work that, or you can pay future you 30%, 40% of your discretionary income, and this is what we could do with it. This is what it looks like in 30 years. Yep. And educating people, and when they look at it, they're thinking, wow, okay, do I need that third watch, or do I right. And then, but it's empowering you to make decisions.
How do you find having that conversation with people about paying future them, right? Because we fortunately had it at a moment in time when I was a little bit more, I guess, mature financially. But what had also happened by that time is I'd earned really well. I'd done a lot of stupid things with money, and I was coming out the other side of saying, well, I don't want to behave like that again. So I had the benefit of poor financial management, not doing the right things, to be a little bit more attuned to listening to the advice. So how do you find that conversation with people?
I think by the time someone's speaking to me, they're already in that mindset, right? 80% of people don't have, a financial plan, or 85% aren't getting, exposure to, this advice. And even when someone comes up to me and have that first conversation, I try and make a really safe space. I'm not here to judge you, right? I'm not here to sit there going, wow, or make fun of your objectives, or to say that's not possible, or you need to be earning this. And I'd say to these people, well, actually, already you've taken the hardest step by, I'm interested, I want to understand. It's like taking an X-ray, or you say, where are we? It's a financial MOT. And those individuals that are interested in asking the questions or finding out, what they need to do to get their retirement income, they've already taken that hardest challenge. And it's amazing. Some people sort of say, well, so what do I need to earn? And you go, well, if you want to have this, you've got to earn this. And like, okay, I can do that. Especially some of these entrepreneurs, I go, okay, and they're
That's
really,
in reach.
And actually I've worked with some clients who've changed I want this, you've told me I've got to do this, I'm currently doing that, so I'm just going to go out and earn more money or do that. And if that's the not the kick up that
the
they
catalyst.
needed, exactly, that they were motivated, but they probably just hadn't sat there, and they're too busy working day in, day out. They're not really thinking about what that means for future them, or what impact that will have. And it's just sharing the inside analytics with individuals.
I think that what you just touched on is a critical point, and it's been reinforcing for me. And I talk about, as you plan your life or your business, you need consistent and near-term positive moments of reinforcement, right? So you're going to work on a 10-year plan, and we talked about the fact that I am quite a long-term thinker and long-term planner, but I know I break that down into shorter time periods, 6 months, a year. And in that shorter time period, I want to see the progress. I want to be able to quantify and touch the progress, which is why the reports, just that bit of paper that you provide once a year when we sit down that says, your passive retirement income based on where you are now is X. And then I look back at the report the year before and I go, okay, I like that. I like that progression. And then at that moment, I think, can I double that? But how much bigger can I make that by next year? And that isn't so much about the quantum of money or the quantum of wealth. It's more about, I can see I'm making the progress, right? I can see I'm further ahead than I was last year. So that is something I always talk to people about. Long-term planning is fine, short-term planning is better, and make sure you've got the positive, like you can check your progress as you go. I wanted to come back to how you became a lawyer, because you weren't always a lawyer. The first time I knew your name wasn't because you were a lawyer. You came through football into being a lawyer, right?
Yeah, so it was a slightly unusual route to becoming a lawyer. As a solicitor now, this is my second career. So I was a professional footballer to start with. When I left school, went straight into professional football. Seems like a long time ago. I think most of the...
It was a long time ago. Like
you're old. You're old. Most of the fans were wearing flat caps and had rattles and things. So it was a long time ago.
It was so long ago that Liverpool were good for the first time. Like, that's how long ago it was.
Yeah, it was. I don't think it had colour TVs at the time, I don't think. But it was a long time ago. But there are a lot of things that I took from my career as a professional footballer that's been helpful in my second career. One of the things that I do think, just coming back to the point that you and Charlie have just been making about long-term thinking, was that I do know that when I was sort of 10, 11, 12 years of age and I was desperate to become a professional footballer, 13, 14, those sort of ages, a lot of your friends would be, going to the park and having a spliff and doing all the things that teenagers do. But I was always in my head, I always felt to myself, I wanted to ignore all of that side of things because I was thinking long-term, delaying gratification.
Yeah.
So taking it forward, becoming a lawyer. When I retired as a footballer, I had to go back to uni to get a degree and then to start the whole journey again about qualifying as a lawyer. And again, it was that same sort of mindset of, don't worry about being a student and having your rucksack and going into lectures.
Just do it.
Just do it and think longer term. So it's all about that delaying gratification, which I think is something that's really, really important to anybody who wants to get to a stage where they can be feel that they're independently successful professionally. It's all about that sort of long-term thought process.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was slightly unusual, but it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I've met, I was able to use a lot of the contacts I had from football now, acting for them, meet people like yourself. So it's been really, really good. And the big thing for me is that I knew that I didn't want to ever really become a coach or a manager just because of the instability of it.
Right.
Back then it was bad. Managers were getting and coaches were moving on after 18 months. Right. Now I think it's weeks.
Yeah.
If a football manager loses 2 matches or 3 matches, he's under pressure.
Could be on his way out.
Yeah.
So you made the decision that I want something continuous, long-term, stable and reliable.
I just hate the feeling of relying on people. So I wanted my own skill set. I wanted my own trade. I wanted my own profession that I knew I could practice. If people let me down, I could go out and do something for myself. And so that's something that I'm really, really big on, that you always have something that you can call your own and you don't have to rely on people too much, because people always have a tendency to let you down.
Yeah. So switching gears, one of the questions I get asked the most is to kind of frame or what are the keys to success? Like if you had to say what it is that's helped you, helped me progress, what is it, right? And I always say the same things, which is like that work ethic, that readiness to pursue something for the long term, not in a stupid sense, because I also think it's important to give up things quickly if they're not working or abandon bad ideas. But that work ethic and long-term determination, I think, has helped me. The other thing that's always helped me is I project myself into the next level before I'm at that level, right? So if I'm kind of here, I look up and say, what has the guy or girl ahead of me in the seat that I want to be in, what have they got? Like, how are they structured? How have they set themselves up? And I mirror it, and I remember meeting Charles Phillips, who was then the president of Oracle in 2008, and I got to see his team, and he had this huge team. And what he explained to me was, this huge team means I can spend most of my time on the things that I'm the best at and that I enjoy the most, because I've got a great team who take care of things that I'm less good at and things that I don't really enjoy. So I've constructed my team on the basis that this is the team I need to be at the next level. So for you, Charlie, when you're advising people earlier in their journey, like, what are the first main two bits of advice you're giving people when they're starting to think about building themselves for that next chapter of their journey?
I think that definitely patience, and patience in the process, patience in the goal. It will grow, that snowball effect, and I think, every time you put together investments, we're doing them for a 5-year period, not a 3-month, period. So it's just understanding the mechanisms or the structure and remembering the objectives.
Yep.
So I think people will get, you're not buying the product for the product,
Right.
because you want to have an equity or because you want to have it. You're buying it for what it realizes for your end goal and your family and let's make sure we use it as the anchor point.
Right.
Is it still right? Is it still hitting these objectives? Are we still
Right.
getting everything that you originally wanted, and we're cancelling out the noise? Because when you're investing, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of markets go up, markets go down. Everybody's got apps and they can sit there and you read the papers, read these articles, have an opinion on everything, and we've got to cancel out the noise and remember, actually, we're investing for your plan over the long term. Yeah. And what's the trajectory like?
Yeah, that's a good point. And so before you come to your second point, and that's another thing, you were pretty rigid, not rigid, but you were really driving with me that we're doing this for the long term, right? And for example, if we look at when we started to be aggressive with ISAs, I think at the beginning, like, it went down.
Ukraine.
Right. Then the Ukraine killed us. And at that time, you were like, okay, things have gone down. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep buying because things are cheaper now. Equities are cheaper. We're going to keep buying because it's for the long term. And I guess I understood that a little bit, but it would have been easy at that point to go,
yeah.
Wow,
I've dipped my toe into it, and and
Right.
it's alien to me, and it's not looking,
Right.
not looking good, because it will go in, in fluctuations.
Yeah,
but
cycles.
what we're trying to do is minimise the volatility and make sure it's conservative gain, growth over the long term,
Yeah.
which is fitting your personal objectives.
Yeah. And then second thing, what's the other thing you would say? You'd say to people early on in their journey?
Be inquisitive, do your research, really, read up on it. And, I want to not be challenged, but it's so much easier for them if they come, I will educate them and also say, look, do your own research,
Yep.
do your own education, come back and, challenge my thinking with me, so we can make sure that, they're really understanding the value, the value of the advice and the
Yeah.
value of the partnership. And
I think that is the thing I appreciate the most about you. Like, we've done well together. I'm grateful for the way the investments that we've done together, the way we've managed the money together has grown over time. It's been a economically successful relationship. But that actually isn't the thing I value about you the most. The thing I value about you the most is the impartiality and the neutrality of the advice, which comes from your ethic of relationship first, right? So we have conversations where you say, Dean, here is a thing that I think you should do. And I say, well, actually, I want to do something else. And I've had you go, oh, actually, yeah, that's much better. You should do that. And sometimes in those scenarios, it's not in your best interest, or you don't make fees from it. And I love the fact that you are always thinking about my long-term progression and less about your kind of short-term gain, to the point where you might, when you propose something, you're very transparent in saying, this is the product, this is how we're going to invest in it, and here's what the firm will make, here's what I'm going to make. You're always very transparent in that. And that, to me, is is the most important and most precious thing actually about our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I always view it as like a chessboard, right? And I'm only seeing the chessboard from one angle, with you, and you're seeing it from all the angles. So as informed as I can be when I come to, advise my move, until I hear, right, tell me everything that's going on, all the other stuff that you've got going on, then it adds clarity. We go, okay, perfect. Now I understand that. I'll put that into the model. We'll update everything, and we'll go again. But we don't. It's impossible for me to see everything that you're doing in one move, and that's where listening to your objectives and underpinning, that's fundamentally the number one anchor to the relationship.
So I would say to everybody, like obviously everybody watching this won't have access to you or to St James's Place, but to me that is kind of fundamental when you're taking financial advice, that whoever you're taking it from isn't telling you that they're trustworthy, they're demonstrating that they're trustworthy. And I think the way that a financial advisor demonstrates that trustworthiness is with track record. So, our track record together is exceptional, but how does the financial advisor present advice? And I've never been sold anything by you, right? At all. I've been given advice. I've been left to determine how that advice sits with me. And if I want to take it, I do. And if I don't want to take it, it's normally because I've got something else happening. And there's never been a issue. And I appreciate that a lot about you. Plus you support our radar events. So if people thinking about whether or not they need a lawyer, right? And not everybody, will need a kind of close proximity lawyer or even a family office lawyer. Like, what would you say are the two things that people should really consider if they're thinking about whether they need a close proximity lawyer?
Well, I mean, it will be dependent on your situation, but the one good thing that I think a really good lawyer can bring is there should be integrity about what you do. There should be a trustworthiness about what you do. So if you've got somebody who can act as a really close advisor, or just somebody who you could just pick the phone up and just ask their opinion on something, I think that that's invaluable. And I think good lawyers can do that, as well as all the legal advice we can give. What I'm hoping that I offer to you, or what I think a good lawyer would do, is to give you a perspective on something, or a bit of wisdom on something from their experience, or maybe a different view to what you think. And it just gives you something to think about. The other thing that I would say that a lawyer would bring to you is being able to, if you're young, it'd be able to give you good connections, being able to connect you to different people that might be able to help you in a different way. A large part of what I do is that I'm a connector. And I think that that's really important, that you're able as an individual to have a really good network. I think, Charlie, I spoke about this, about us working together with Dean. What's really key to me is that we work together as a team. Martin, as the accountant, Charlie, myself, will have regular conversations. This is what Dean wants to do. This is what I suggest. Charlie, what do you think? And then we all put it into a mix in, and then we come out with a neat piece of advice for you, Dean. This is what we do. And I always think that the collaboration, you have to be a certain amount of humility about yourself, because sometimes people will say things to you that you disagree with, or will be over the top of what you've said. But you have to have a certain amount of humility about you to be able to work with him.
Keep the client in mind. Right?
Yeah, always, because I'm not working for my ego, I'm working for my client. So that's what you have to have. So I would say, being somebody who can give good advice and be somebody who's got good knowledge is important, and also someone who's a connector. I think those are the two things I think a good lawyer would bring. That
with us, Udo, has been the number one thing for me as well. Is my since we've worked together, my pace has accelerated. Like I'm able to move faster, going back to being like the things I care about and the things I want to work on. I'm able to move faster because once something comes out of my hands, sometimes it goes into your hands, Charlie, but more often than not, it goes into Anne-Marie or your hands. I know it's going to be done. I know it's going to be done to a high level of quality. I know that I'm going to be represented in a way that I'll be pleased about. So now I'm able to do many more things, right? Just because you get the whole picture. And you're a person who will drive a great outcome as well. And that's one of the things I appreciate about you.
Fantastic, good stuff. Long may it continue.
Long may it continue. Well, look, this has been a brilliant conversation. Hopefully you got a few insights into how to build and leverage a team of great experts. Charlie, Udo, thank you for your time.
No worries.
And we got more stuff to talk about. Take care, guys. See you soon.